Welcome to another edition of Popcorn Bucket List. It's going to be a relaxed episode, a real short one. We were too busy to do an episode last month, but we felt we needed to come in here, do some updates on some things, talk about some big news that has been happening. Looks like on the horizon, things are going to kind of reshape. We can hopefully the next episode kind of get a little bit more back to business.
Yep.
But
hopefully we'll be there next episode, hopefully.
So first things first, just to kind of go over what we will be covering here. Again, we're going to give you some updates on some of the big news stories that have been happening, and then we're going to do kind of one more round of some of our recommendations that we've seen on some of the streaming services, like we did do on our episode a couple months ago. So let's get into what has been going on in the movie world. Really, some of the big reports are saying that right now some new movie releases are starting to come out in July. California movie theaters are going to start opening up here late June, July as well. So start looking towards your own local movie theaters, see what their policies might be, what their updates. Ryan, why don't you let us know, you kind of have contact with the local theater here in Marshall, Minnesota. What have they been kind of saying?
Yeah, well, Marshall here in town, we have a CEC theater. And the last I talked with Isaac was we're kind of thinking the later end of July. However, to support the business, as you know, these are trying times for everybody, they will be selling popcorn this actually tomorrow. So if you have a chance to go pick it out on them or pick it up tomorrow, go online to cectheaters.com, the Marshall 6, and you can go there and order some popcorn. I believe they do it every other weekend or so, but check the website, check the Marshall CEC Marshall Facebook page. And they'll have more details and just a way to support the business while they're shut down right now, and hopefully we'll get back in the theater soon.
And I can tell you, knowing the size of the bag of the popcorn that they have, it's a good deal.
Yeah, you get the bag of popcorn. It's like this big. It's huge. It's great. It's great.
It's a lot wider than you'd think, too.
Yeah.
I sent a picture of it to my cousins. They thought I'd get it done a lot sooner, and I was like a day past their predictions.
Yep, and it's made fresh, too, so it tastes good.
Tastes great. So be sure to check that out. And check out your own local theater, see if they're doing other things like that, and just to know when they're going to start coming back here, because it will be soon by all reports. But the real big news that we've kind of been following a little bit this past month is a little bit of a war going on.
The battle.
Universal versus major theater companies, specifically AMC. Ryan, you brought my attention to this story. Why don't you give us the rundown? What are we looking at here?
Yep. So this is a interesting story. It originally happened when Trolls World Tour was released on VOD. Yes, some movies get released straight to VOD right away, and some do their theater window. Usually it's not a problem when the companies and the theater chains communicate. When they talk it out, they make deals, they understand. But to my knowledge and what I've been reading was the Trolls did not do that. They just went straight to VOD. And then after that came around, they said they're going to continue to put movies in the theater and VOD at the same time.
Specifically the Studio Universal.
Yes, yeah, specifically the Studio Universal. Now, the problem with that is when you bring a movie to a movie theater, there's a thing called a 90-day window, I believe it's called, or I believe the days are 90 windows where it's only available in theaters and not VOD or DVD or anything. So when you cut that away, you take that away from the theaters and then make it available at home, obviously the theaters aren't going to make as much money. So it's just kind of a battle of who's going to be. AMC said that they would no longer show Universal movies at their theater as long as they are going to release movies to their theaters and VOD at the same time, which has kind of went right away. It was kind of, oh, that's terrible, AMC did that, and then it was kind of, oh, Universal, and it's very back and forth, and more theater chains are joining AMC, saying, hey, if you're not going to respect the 90-day window, then we're not going to show your movies. So as this is playing out with the whole coronavirus, it's interesting to watch, and that's kind of the latest that I know about it. I haven't heard come to terms anybody. So
this was something we thought when we first heard this story, this was way back in like
Yes.
mid-May,
Yeah.
around that time. We thought this would kind of wrap up pretty quickly.
We did,
It was
yes.
kind of a standoff situation, who's going to flinch first. We had predicted who we thought was going to flinch first, but this is kind of drawn on a lot longer than we thought.
Yes.
And for context, some of the movies that this is actually going to kind of affect, there's a Candyman remake, which I believe is pushed by Jordan Peele, one of the bigger names in Hollywood right now,
Yeah.
kind of doesn't do much wrong. But another one that this might actually affect coming next year, if this isn't resolved, which, again, we thought it was going to be resolved in a week. This has gone on a month and a half. We don't know how long it's going to go. Fast 9, one of the next Fast and Furious movies, is going to be possibly affected by this, depending on how long this goes. We don't know. There's also some animated movies that may be affected by this too. Croods 2, I believe, is right now on track to release sometime in December. So we'll have to see if maybe the studios, I know some of the actors, I remember reading an article that were kind of more in favor of it being in theaters.
Yep.
So if this does drag on, Universal might start losing some of their actors involved in
with
movies
the
as well.
actors, some of the incentives that happen is the more money your film makes at a movie theater, you will get a slice of that. So that's one thing the actors have thought about. Also, you're thinking about Oscars. We all know that this year for the Oscars is different. They are allowing movies that did not play in theaters to be available for Oscars. However, I have heard from sources that next year it will go back to it has to play in one of those specific theaters in order to be eligible for the Oscars. Now, whether that's going to happen or not, we'll just have to wait and see. But if you're an actor or director and you think you have a great script, an Oscar-worthy script, but the people that are going to make your movie can't play it at a movie theater, would you try to find a different production house to make it? So there's a lot of questions, a lot of things. So we'll keep you up to date. When we know more, we'll let you guys know more.
We've turned into a serious news organization.
We have.
One that only updates you on the monthly basis.
On a monthly basis,
We're basically colonial news organizations is what we're doing. But yeah, that is a big story. We didn't think we were going to be able to talk about it this late in the game, but it's drawn on for a little while. So just some other things that have kind of been happening, obviously with the introduction of HBO Max. You have a lot of things on the streaming services side that have been shuffled around. There was some stuff on Hulu, I believe, that have now available on HBO Max. But they kind of got into some hot water right away. They had Gone with the Wind premiered on their platform and then was pulled shortly after. The updates, though, is that it was a temporary pull.
Yep,
it might not even already be on there by the time this video comes back up.
True.
They were just going to add some things.
Some contextual things to before and maybe after. I don't know for sure, but it will be back and with some context to the story and the time period.
But yeah, HBO Max now jumping into the streaming wars among many others, and we expect a few more to come out here too.
There's many more coming out, I would say, in the distant year or two, especially with the coronavirus, how it's kind of changing people's watch patterns, I would say. So I'm excited for that. Mm-hmm. But we have to talk about the Snyder Cut.
Yes, we're going to go. One of the bigger stories. So this is something I've been following for a long time. One of the things that really enticed fans to come to HBO Max is the introduction of the Snyder Cut. For those of you who don't know, the Snyder Cut refers to the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, the DC movie, team-up movie that came out 2-3 years ago, I think at this point. I can't remember when it came out. But it's quite a long story. Just to kind of wrap it up as best as I can, the original cut was going to be somewhere between 2 hours, 45 minutes to over 3 hours. And then I believe Warner Brothers made some sort of mandate. They wanted their superhero movies specifically, to be around 2 hours.
Yep.
Well, due to some personal family tragedy, Zack Snyder was not able to stick around for the reshoot process that the movie was going to need to make that 3 hour movie into 2 hours. So Joss Whedon stepped in and did, nobody knows what percentage of the movie is reshot his or not.
Yep.
If you know Joss Whedon and you watch the movie, you can kind of tell certain parts, especially. But so ever since then, people have been begging for the Snyder Cut, as it was called. A lot of people then argued, well, that doesn't exist. all of a sudden, about 7 months ago, Jason Momoa on Twitter was like, "Oh yeah, I've seen it."
Yeah.
This thing that we thought, this is basically like Aquaman saying Atlantis now exists, basically.
Yes.
So people have been begging for it, and they finally said they're going to release it next year. Now, this does not mean people like me were wrong. We're actually still technically right. We were saying it doesn't exist because you'd have to redo a whole bunch of post-production
there's
stuff.
a lot of stuff that's still going to need to be done. And one of the things that they've talked about was maybe not making it like just one movie, having it like a 2-part mini-series that, because according to them, it's a lot of film. There's a lot of stuff to look through and to piece it together. So we could be looking at a potentially mini-series or even like maybe a 2-part thing. So I'm super excited for it. It's going to be good. It'll be interesting.
It might be just enough to get me to get HBO Max, though.
Yep.
This could be their Mandalorian. Like how Mandalorian was the big thing for Disney Plus to get people on the board there. But speaking of streaming services, we're going to wrap things up here. Obviously, one of the big things about this show is we want to recommend things for you to watch. So we're just going to do a few recommends here. I'll start us off with one I've been kind of focusing on recently. True crime and unsolved mysteries is a pretty popular genre right now. There's a couple that I've been watching. Specifically on Prime. I think a few of them you can actually watch on a few different platforms. A fun one that you can watch on YouTube, Prime, and Hulu is BuzzFeed Unsolved. They do true crime, but they also do some paranormal stuff. They talk about ghosts and aliens and all that. They were in the news. They weren't in the news, but one of the cases they actually covered in their Unsolved was actually solved, actually, if you can believe it or not. So that was a little bit of relevancy. Another fun one I've been watching is the 90s Unsolved Mysteries TV show. Now, the reason why that one's fun to watch now is because so much time has passed. A lot of those cases have actually kind of been solved. So if you want the true crime element, but you want some closure to a lot of these, you'll actually get some of that. Whereas a lot of these true crime shows, a lot of them are unsolved still. So you don't get that closure. So that's a recommend I've been looking at here. Ryan, why don't you throw us with a quick one? What have you been watching recently?
Well, one of the films I watched recently that I thought was very good, it's called Brawl on Cell Block 99. It's got, off the top of my head, Vince Vaughn is in it, and it's a very serious, dramatic role. It's not comedy or kind of those rom-coms that he does. It's a very different role for Vince Vaughn. And
he's bald in this one, so you know he's serious.
Bald. Yes, it's a very interesting movie. One of the things I found fascinating about it is there's no soundtrack for it. There might be one song in a scene that I'm thinking of, but other than that, there's no sound. It's the natural sounds. It's the walking, the breathing, the punching. It's a very well done movie. I remember when this came out, it didn't really get a lot of. I think it got talked about a little bit, but not a whole lot. And then I just decided to sit down and watch it with a friend, and it was amazing. Very good film. Very good film.
Very good pick. Just a real quick one I also want to throw out there. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is the story about Mr. Rogers. I think we've both watched this movie. We both recommended it on the show, I think, or talked about it at least. That's coming up on Hulu sometime this month. I'm not sure if it's released yet. I just thought I'd throw that out there because we could use a little positivity right now. And I think that'd be a good place to start. Movie. Lastly, do you have any other recommends there, Ryan? You want to talk about?
Right off the top of my head, no. There's a couple things I'm watching. I'm watching the new 13 Reasons Why. So
Season 4.
Very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's in the public. It's a lot of people talk about it, a lot of people see it. People make memes, all that stuff. It's out there. I want to see it. I want to know what's going on.
I'm going to end this show here today with something new. Something we're going to try out. It's something we usually give our number one recommends. I'm going to give you what I'm going to call a negative recommend. Stay away from this. This is fresh, just released today as we're recording it. I watched a little bit of it and my suspicions and fears were confirmed. Disney Plus was originally going to have this as a theatrical release. It's the Artemis Fowl movie. I do not get into a lot of book series, especially anymore, but in elementary school I read a lot. And I read this series. It's a very fun series. It's got sci-fi elements, which is something that's more my element. It's got fantasy elements. I'm not going to get into what it's all about. It's got bad guys that you want to root for, especially in the first book. It's a really interesting overall 8 stories. This movie is none of that. They throw all of it away. All the things that made the first book good.
Out the window.
And I'll admit, I knew that going in. I saw one of the recent trailers they were going to release for this, and I could tell there's no way they're following any of this. I was going to give it a chance. I gave it its chance. No.
And it disappointed.
It's just bad. So that is my negative recommend. If you're going to go on Disney Plus, I'd rather you watch that High School Musical show that people have been talking about. That's like a paradox within itself, where they're doing a High School Musical while doing High School Musical. I don't understand it, but I'd rather you watch that. Okay, that's my rant for the day. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's going to do it for us for this episode of Popcorn Bucket List. We would like to thank you for sticking around, watching us. Like I said, next month is looking like things are going to really reshape up. We'll be back to business, talking about some box office, some theater releases. So you're going to want to stay tuned. Come back and check us out beginning. Hopefully the end of June, early July is when we'll release the next one here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to comment some of your own recommendations, some of the things you've been watching, and maybe we'll check them out and talk about them on the next episode.
Yeah, we're more than happy to watch some films or TV shows that you guys think would be interesting or just want us to watch and cover. We've seen a lot, and we like growing our knowledge of movies and TV shows and anything. Let us know.
That's right. For myself and Ryan Meyerberg, we'd like to thank you for watching and stay safe out there.